All right, welcome everyone to the first behind the screens for the Relics of the Ancients campaign. I think the first session went really well. There were some ups and downs emotionally with the session, which who knew was starting off a campaign that way. But anyway, it was really great. Having said all that, I'm going to jump right in. Before I do, though, if you're one of my players and you're watching, stop. You don't want to have anything spoiled, and you don't want to ruin anything from the last game experience by kind of pulling back the curtain too much. So don't watch these guys. All right, here we go. I'm going to dive in right to my notes. Now, you might have seen the campaign planning guide that I have. I use that quite a bit for the purposes of what's going on with this campaign. I'm just going to use some simple Google Notes. I'm going to do Google Doc, and then this Google Doc will sort of grow as the behind the screens go, but also as I take notes along the way. It's just for simplicity and making sure that I can be flexible. The other documents are great, and they're flexible as well, and putting those together. But for the sake of sharing it and going through these things, I really wanted to make sure that I'm keeping it as streamlined as possible, and also to show that you don't need anything other than pieces of paper. In this case, it's virtual pieces of paper. It's Google Docs, so it's free stuff. So guys, don't go too complicated. All right, so a little bit of the campaign planning. You guys know that I like to do a story question, which is after I've got a description of the campaign. In session 0, you saw which ones we had to choose from and which one they picked. So I went ahead and wrote my story question based on that, and so based on the fact that they have this description of what they want to play in, the campaign story question for me is, in a race to collect as many newly discovered ancient relics of immense power, the heroes endeavor to collect them for the Athenaeum. But will they succeed before the other antiquarian societies collect the relics for themselves? So this is sort of the main crux. There's going to be a ton of twists and turns and developments as we go, but if I have this in mind, then that tells me some things. It tells me, okay, their primary push should be going to find these relics. They should have a reason to want to. There should be something important about them besides the fact that they're going to get paid to go do it, in my mind at least. But also, the tension can rise if I have other groups doing the same thing, and are they doing it for the best of reasons? So this is a good way to keep me on track as I go. I'm just going to glance through some of this because I think it's important to just give you an idea that Melanie, as you guys may have saw in the session 0, is a brand new player. So Crystal has played with me before, and then Carrie and I started playing this games years and years ago. So we were back in first and second edition. Varying experience levels. I just couldn't let the first time Melanie was going to roll up a character and play, the first session, I couldn't really let that be virtual. I just feel like there's something great about having a table and rolling the dice right in front of your friends and kind of doing it that way. So we're fortunate enough that we have that option. Melanie lives, within a half hour from where we are. So we had Melanie come over. And then I also had, you may have seen a little cameo from Ethan, my stepson. You'll see a cameo in some of the videos. I think it was the introducing a new player video. But anyway, he is wanted to play, and I needed to have a character that could come in but not be extremely important and tied to the campaign. So what I did, and this is again on the fly, right before we're about to do their pre-session, I used the Essentials kit D&D has. There's some great pre-made, ready-to-go sidekicks. And the sidekicks, the name may sound, not so wonderful, but the sidekick mechanic and the way that they put those characters together, I think are really genius, because it really boils it down into a streamlined set of classes, so to speak. And so Quinn Hightopple is a halfling warrior, and you get a couple options with him. He loved the fact that it said on the card that Quinn loves to, kind of ball tap people as that are bigger than him. So he got a big kick out of that, being almost 10. And so, so anyway, you can pull in other resources, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You don't have to roll up a new character every time you have to play. So it was a great addition to this. It fit in with the story. Crystal's character was basically going to on this mission because Quinn was going to meet her mentor to pick something up, and she's like, all right, well, I'm going to go with him because I'd like to see my mentor. It's been a while. And then beyond that, Melanie's character, Alora, received a letter, and this was based on my character prologue tables that she rolled, and one of the letters were, hey, you're a secret child of a noble family, and they want you to come see them, and here's $100 gold pieces to travel. So anyway, so this is a lot more than $100. This is the way that was hooking her into going to Ventia, which is the capital of the Ventian Empire. I already had this person in mind just because I wanted it to be someone that was very consequential in the grand scheme of things. And in her backstory, her parents were antiquarians that went on missions all the time. So the reason that she actually lives in this town is because when she was very young, they were going through that town. It's kind of a secreted town, but they knew about it. And didn't want to take her with her on that campaign. Sometimes they do, but if it's a little dangerous, they try not to. And so they met some friends there and left her there while they went to go on their own archaeological expedition. And they never came back. So Alora was then left without her parents, and she was sort of adopted into Riva's family, and they're sort of adopted sisters, and so it made a good hook to bring those two together. As they traveled and went to go meet up with Javin, who was the person that they were supposed to meet, Riva's mentor, they left and they found this little hidden glade, and while they were there, they saw that there were some weird things going on. It looked like a campsite, it looks like some other things. This I actually pulled, I can't remember where I pulled this from. If I think of it, I'll put it in the description. But this was an encounter that I had run across online or somewhere, and I just modified it. So they had a battle between some bandits because they were masquerading as sort of merchants that had a cart, traveling merchants. And when they came into this hidden glade, they were acting a little strange. And Riva went up to go talk to them and to try to buy something, and it turned out that they were not the owners of that cart. They had killed them and put them in the back, and so a battle ensues, and they are basically defeated by the heroes. And at the end of that, these little elemental creatures that live in the glade started popping up, and then they moved the family that was in the back, and they buried them. They must have known them or something. That was just an on-the-fly thing that I came up with. Again, guys, on the fly. If you think of something cool that ties together with a druid and a ranger and a halfling that are all from this hidden glade, man, seeing other nature spirits come alive and do something really keeps thematically with what the characters think and helps. So I looked up some little nature spirits. I don't know if I did it right, don't care. I just made them up as they go, and they just emerged from pieces of grass or from the stone, and those spirits came together, little tiny, like 4 or 5 inch tall creatures that then moved them and buried them, and then made it like those were cemetery plots that had been there for years. You couldn't even tell that the earth had been moved. And so they took care of all those people that had died, and then before they left, they gave each of them a little stone disc that when tapped creates a little sunlight, foreshadowing for what's to come. And you'll see when we get there. So it's a little magical stone. All it does is produce a little sunlight. That's it. So it's handy, but nothing, too powerful. As they traveled, they went to the farm that I'm skipping over some stuff just because we haven't even gotten to the first session. So, bear with me. But I think I'm hitting the highlights of what's really important. And they get to a farm. Quinn is supposed to meet Javin at this farm to pick up something. They get there and no Javin. Actually, the farm, nobody's at the farm either. And then from an old barn pops out this huge mastiff, and Riva instantly realizes that mastiff is actually Quinn's dog, Coffee. She used to travel around with Javin's dog, Coffee. So Javin and Coffee used to, be inseparable. And actually, Javin is a gnome and used to ride Coffee. Coffee has a little saddle and takes him around. So that was his mount for the most part. And it was really disconcerting. She'd never seen them apart. They're always together. And so she casts Speak with Animals, and we were actually on the fly. Didn't know she was going to do that, so I had to speak as Coffee and give some information and let them know that, Javin's gone and hasn't been back for 5 days, and all that Coffee knew was he was heading that direction, which is toward the city. So, interesting. Coffee jumps in the back of the wagon with them, or the cart that they now had from the merchant family that had passed away, or was murdered, I guess. And they started heading towards the city to go see if they can find him, find out more. And as they're doing that, they see this little fox in the distance, curiously watching everything that's going on, and that is interesting to them. It's also my way of connecting what's happening ahead of the game with Hendrik. Hendrik is Carrie's character, and he is a wizard of the Athenaeum. Athenaeum is, in my world, a sort of college of sorts that is has 3 main towers: the Tower of the Arcane, Tower of Sentinels, and the Tower of Song, I believe. No, Tower of Legends. And so that's so that people can train as wizards, monks, and bards, and they all have a purpose in this society. That's kind of the college for all of those. It's not to say that there aren't other wizards and other bards and other monks somewhere else in the world, but this is sort of the primary way that if you're going to be one of those characters, that's kind of where you come through. So the Athenaeum, as you might think, being sort of a university of sorts, also is responsible for collecting artifacts, or they have their interest in it and trying to make sure that they can preserve some things. And Henrik is contacted by the dean of the Tower of the Arcane and asked to come. He's got some mission for him, asked to come meet him again. So I put that in the form of a letter. I didn't have a chance to roll, I didn't have a chance to run a game with Carrie, even virtually. Schedules didn't work out. But I had already run the one for Melanie and Crystal and Ethan. So I knew what I had to give as far as information to bring the connection together. So what I did is I wrote this in an email for Carrie, and it's a letter that was sent. So he's actually receiving the email, which is the letter that the dean sent to him asking him to come. So this is my way of getting some information across and then getting him there. Then, additionally, for the email, I told him what happened when he was there. So, like, he got there and he got into the town. Coach made good time. He's traveling the Starlight Roadway. It was a pleasant trip, yada, yada, yada. And then, while he was searching around the town and shopping and hanging out with some friends, his familiar, which is a fox, that was a specific request of Carrie, which is no problem to me, so we have a fox familiar. He let him go off on his own, and or she. I really don't even know the familiar's name yet. I need to get with Carrie on that. Just kind of exploring. So when the familiar returns, mentally connects, explains what the familiar saw. In addition, the familiar was investigating around the farm because it saw a body. Small, gnomish-sized body. So this was a way of getting Carrie the information, got him curious, and he starts walking from the city towards where the fox, saw all this stuff happen. Brings us to the actual first session. So that's the way for us to get everybody together. That's my way of bringing all of the players into session 1. So, for me, when I'm doing a session like this, whether I was broadcasting this live or doing it in person, I write a session introduction and I kind of beef it up even more so when it's kicking off the campaign. I went through the process of thinking through, how do I want to start this? Because I might not be able to control what happens in the middle or really what happens at the end, because the players can take it anywhere. but I can control the start. I know how to really, kick things off so that it prompts them, and I can sort of suspect where things might go, but then it may go completely different after that. So I need to at least nail what I want the game to start off like. So for me, I write it down, and I write it down pretty much word for word, and I improvise as I go if I think something needs to be changed. And so this is what you heard me see at the session introduction. I will do something similar to this for each subsequent section to maybe recap what happened previously, but also set the stage for the next step. As a DM, sometimes I've found in the past that I struggled with how much to tell the players, hey guys, this is what you're doing now, without taking away their ability to play their characters, right? Like, I don't want to role play every second and every minute of the day, so you have to jump forward in time a little bit. You have to set the stage, and this is my way of doing that. So let them know what they're doing. I'll let them know what they are in the process of at that moment. Who's there, what's going on, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And you might have seen that in another video. So this is kind of me setting the stage. Then, if you saw I hope you have. If you saw the first session, then you know how this went. It was at the crossroads, and my method of asking some encounter questions to really kick things off. I did this during my planning. I said, you know what? What are they going to try to do? They're going to try to find Javin and figure out what's going on. And I wrote this after, most of this, after I had that pre-session. I knew where I wanted to go, but I didn't dive in too deep with this because some things might have happened that were great in that pre-campaign session. So then the next thing is, okay, what's the challenge to the goal? Well, the challenge to the goal is Javin is dead, and he's behind the Shrine to Melora. I also knew that I was going to have some type of shadow creatures attack the heroes. I didn't know what they were. I still don't know exactly what they are. I know what they wanted them to do was create a sense of fear, urgency, and explain in sort of a preliminary way that there's something happening beyond what they figured would be, right? So something beyond just collecting artifacts for the players, but also something beyond just it seems like Javin just didn't fall off a horse cart, right? Like something happened. So anyway, so here is the encounter goes. I knew that I wanted to have this when the sun is setting and the light was dimming, so I kind of timed it, and might have fudged the time a little bit in travel. Didn't really matter. Wasn't really evident to the players yet. It's the first session. So then I had this as rules. So didn't take much to hit him. 13 armor class. Only had 3 or 4 hit points. No problem there. Don't have any bonus. It was just what I rolled on the dice was what I was going to have them hit. I didn't even give them an attack bonus. This is just me doing something minor. And then the damage, I gave a 6-sider because I wanted it to feel threatening. And for first level characters, having 5 creatures that can do a d6 damage, that's something, right? And beyond that, while they're in dim light or darkness, they have resistance to damage that isn't force, psychic, or radiant. You may have noticed that some of those things are from other shadow creatures that you've seen in the DM guide. That's intentional. I want them to feel as if they're those things. I also want them to feel like they are from the Shadowfell. And so that'll be something that I'm going to be playing with as I go. I have little drops of hints at that, but nothing concrete yet. So as that played out, like you saw, which I thought was great, I do think that I did not know that I was going to be hitting Crystal so hard with the death of Javin. They haven't actually played together, but it was just all in discussion and backstory. And you can really emotionally tie characters together when they're so invested in what's going on. So just be aware of that as a DM. You want to make sure you're treading lightly with stuff, but this was a real big way to do that. And I also felt like I need to give those hints that he can come back, right? Like, so that was the way I needed to go. So this, for the encounter response, as you know I like to do, let me know that, you know, she was really saddened by the loss of him, and everybody else is kind of shocked and nervous. And, you know, they aren't sure what's going to happen next. And what was their final choice? Well, their final choice after that encounter was to go to the Athenaeum and to meet with Deme Alexandrin. They had found that Javin looked like he was going to do that, or had done it recently. Henrik was already going to go. It just seemed natural. It was a great choice for them to do. And for me, the group is together. Yes. Bringing them together in a way that makes sense. Shadow creatures are defeated. Using, by the way, the fact that, and this was an on-the-fly thing, when Melanie thought to bring out the stone and touch it and say, you know, I'm going to shed light on it, I was, of course it's going to do damage to them. Why wouldn't it do damage? And I let her roll a d6 because they do a d6. Just because I thought it would be fun, and I think that that was a really good idea, and you should promote that with the players, I think. And why wouldn't it cause damage? It just makes sense, right? So that's what I did. And the unknown voices. By the way, this was completely on the fly. I did not plan for this. The on the fly piece of I didn't know. I really didn't know. Didn't think. I should have. It was a shrine to Melora. She's a steward of Melora. It just made sense that Riva would go and pray at the shrine in honor and, you know, reverence over her friend, who was also a steward of Melora. It made sense that she did that. So when she did, with the black arcane mark that nobody could figure out behind the shrine being defiled, it was just evident that I had to make it so that that shrine was not a shrine to Melora anymore. Something changed it. And so that was my key into, they need to talk about this. So as they go into the next encounter, they're trying to find someone who can help Javin. They're trying to get answers about what happens. What's the challenge is only Henrik is really the only one of the group that officially is allowed to get into the Tower of the Arcane. And maybe the possible outcomes, maybe Spiros helps the group, maybe he doesn't. Not very likely. He's probably going to help them. Or what could have happened is they may not learn as much if they didn't ask the right questions and role play that out, and they did, which was great. So, you know, they showed up there. Quinn and Coffee guard Javin's body in the cart while they're in the Athenaeum. As part of the backstories, again, character prologue is great. You should use it. Or Heroic Chronicle. If you don't use anything close to mine, just use the Heroic Chronicle format in the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. I think it's a great way of making sure that you have a set of parameters around backstory. Sometimes if you ask a character or ask a player to create a character's backstory, they will come with volumes of backstory. And it's all awesome, and I'm glad that they can do that. But when that happens, it often may go into a direction that you were not happy with. As far as... this is the second encounter response. You see how I copy and paste here. Which goes into a direction that doesn't fit the campaign. So if you have a method of creating backstory that they can then expand on as they go, it just makes things easier. And they had a blast. I mean, what you didn't see in Session 0 was all of the text messages and emails and phone calls and other Zoom calls and things that we did because people had more questions and wanted to find out more. It's just, can't recommend it enough. Create your own charts. Don't use mine. Don't use the ones in Heroic Chronicle. Make your own stuff that fit your world. At any rate, Alora had a thing that showed up in one of the pages that she rolled where a mage saw potential in her when she was a young person and was willing to train her, but they didn't accept, and then they said, oh, you can always come back. Well, I made this Spiros Alexandrin, who is now the head of the Tower of the Arcane. So this was at some point when he was traveling, and he went to Ungaro after Alora was orphaned, and stayed there with Riva and her family. And so he's able to make that connection. This is great. You know, I know these people at some level. I know Henrik because he was a graduate from here. And then he explains that one of the reasons that he called him in to begin with were these ancient relics that are showing up. So, again, I don't need to recap too much. You guys have seen it, so or hopefully you've seen it so that you can see how this went live. So what does this mean for me? She knows, you know, Riva is at ease now. She feels better knowing that that Javin's getting the help he needs. Alora feels like finding the relic is more important than meeting with her uncle. So that tells me something about not only the character of Alora, but the player. The player is like, now I want to take this story hook and I want to go on this quest because her background was archaeology. She's really getting into that. I think it works out really well. And then, so then, you know, what do we think is going to happen now? Or what do the heroes think? Well, they think Javin's going to be brought back, which would be great. And they even talked about him going back to Ongro to stay with his brother. Perfect. What their final choice was, we're going to go to the Austin Reach. So I know, what does this mean for me? This means I am expecting these two things to happen. Whether I do this in my intro and just explain what happened to put them at ease and set the stage and get right to the action by narrating the travel and how they got there and what was going on, which I will likely do, or whether we play that out and we role play Javin coming back and them seeing him and all that stuff. I don't know yet, but this is part of what I'll think about as we go. I have an extra week because we had to take a week off, unfortunately, right in the middle. So I'm going to think this through and think about how I want this to go. I don't want to rob them of any role-playing experiences, but I also know that we're playing 2-hour sessions and I want to make it count. So, you know, this was really how I did this. I think it was a great way for me to, and this isn't me, this is all of the tips I've learned, you know, from everybody that I've read. Like, when someone's playing D&D and running a game, it's the things they've learned from books, other DMs, everything else. So things I've seen from Matt Colville, seen from, if you have not read the Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, Sly Flourish, is that book, it's amazing. So that strong start is great. And then just, you know, I think narrating things and, you know, borrowing some things that Matt Mercer did. Although, one of the things, we'll talk about in another session a little bit more, but one of the things I kind of worry about is sometimes I'm watching Critical Role and I will have an idea that I was going to use in my campaign and I'll turn to Crystal and I'll say, damn it, I can't do that now because Mercer just put it in his, and it's great. I'm glad he did. I have no problem, but man, that means that anytime I go with it after that, it's going to look as if I was, you know, ripping off Mercer, and that's not what I'm doing. So, Matt Mercer, sorry if I ever do anything after you. Hopefully, it'll be enough my spin that it won't be, you know, seen as a ripoff. But so far, I think we're in good space. Quite honestly, a lot of these tropes, you know, a lot of these tropes are things that everybody's done before, and they're familiar because what might seem cliche, if you do it right. I think I actually heard the Dungeon Dudes talking about this the other day. Great channel, by the way. Good job, guys. You know, tropes are only bad and overdone if they aren't handled correctly, or they may feel that way when you're watching it in a movie or a TV show or reading it in a book. It's different when you're playing it because you've always had that feeling of this is what I would have done. And so sometimes you can lean into things that seem familiar, not too familiar. You want to make it a little bit your own, but at any rate, hopefully this will give you an idea of how I planned a little bit ahead of time. And guys, I had D&D Beyond up, so I could use that for tracking. They have the encounter tracker in beta, so I was able to do that. And I just had a piece of paper. So do what you got to do. As time goes on and the levels go higher, it's gonna get harder than just a few scratches on paper and D&D Beyond glances. It'll be a little bit more difficult to run, but I'm having a blast. So hopefully you're enjoying it, and hopefully you've enjoyed this and seeing a little bit of behind the scenes. I will do more about prep and how I react to things for the next campaign, or sorry, the next session in the campaign after we do it. But yeah, I hope you guys are doing well, and we'll catch you next time.